All right. Welcome, my viewers. I see we already have a lot of people in chat. This is going to be fun. This is day 2 of my examination of MARK SEIFTER. And hi, Mark. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How about you?
Good, good. And on my thumbnail, I was talking about. Well, I've already done a video on high-level play in Pathfinder 2e that I think most people who are on live right now have seen. And it's been a topic of interest for me. I've been planning a set of videos about both Pathfinder and D&D. And one thing that struck me in discussions about high-level play in 5e was this idea that it comes with some problems like balance and work for the DM that are inevitable, and I'm thinking to myself, well, they're not inevitable, and I mean, I think that they're. I'll just say some thoughts I have on the high level play in general, and try to. I think a starting place is what are the problems of high level play that we can kind of agree on, and then before talking about what Pathfinder 2e tries to do and whether it successfully does that. And yeah, I mean, what I see is a lot of so starting with the very first OD&D in 1974, spells were powerful. They're kind of more powerful than mundane means, and that is part of the tradition of the game. And it has had kind of it makes demands on other parts of the system for those who want their marshals to have just as much impact in battles, but also on just overall the story and have utility outside of combat too. Having those having magic be as it was in the 1974 edition, and keeping it like it was, makes a lot of the rest of the design less stable. And I think that so if you have a spell that is called disintegrate in the game, you have save or suck effects, save or die effects, and all of this piles on over time. And marshals therefore need more damage to compensate. And if the battle's going to end in round 1, maybe the marshals should have more damage to kill things in round 1. And kind of what we have is a number of issues. One, I think it makes it harder to plan an exciting combat, particularly that you've built up for in your story, to have an exciting boss monster with the big villain, without it sometimes being disappointing because, one, it might be over too soon. It might be too easy. Maybe you kill the parties. Maybe you kill the party. And also, what often happens when I find DMing 5e is that I'm also, finding myself, fudging numbers behind the GM screen, or doing a lot of work in homebrewing stat blocks. And then on top of all this, especially with Pathfinder 1e, when I was playing it, there was a lot of complexity. And just recently, I'm playing level 1 Pathfinder First Edition in last week, and seeing a lot of changes to the alchemist's bomb throwing stat when they cast Reduce Person and drink their mutagen, all at level 1, and getting a few. It's just reminding me that those modifiers can really stack up and make the game complicated in 3rd edition and Pathfinder First. So anyway, I've kind of grouped these problems in a couple of headings. One, just keeping fun balance, work for the GM, and overall complexity for all the players and the GM. So I don't know if you have anything you want to say in response to what I said before we start talking about Pathfinder 2e.
Well, it certainly seems like you have, over the course of that story, identified some of the pain points that are in high-level play, such as sort of the asymmetry between spellcasters and martial characters, rocket tag in some editions, and so on. Although you're quite correct that like an alchemist in Pathfinder First Edition could cause some of these issues as soon as first level. I certainly played an alchemist that had an armor class that was so high that nothing could hit me except on a 20 in a certain encounter where the GM threw something absolutely ridiculous at us, and he correctly knew that my alchemist was not going to be hit unless he rolled a 20.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. And I want to ask for just to say some of this will be some repeat of last time. What you joined Paizo when, and and when was that in relation to the overall process leading to second edition Pathfinder?
So I am currently the director of game design at Roll for Combat, but previously I worked as the design manager at Paizo. I joined Paizo. I was there for about 8 years, and I started up just before we were really getting in depth of working on Unchained, which was like halfway through Pathfinder First Edition. And I technically did a tiny bit of stuff in Monster Codex, I guess, but I think of Unchained as my first book. And then Occult Adventures and beyond. And like at that point in time, they told me right away, we're going to do a second edition. And we had some concept docs that we created kind of soon after that were just like very conceptual ideas. Like the one I had for the 4 degrees of success system was a concept doc that was very early on, for instance, and some of them that were just not used whatsoever, and some of them that were. But yeah, I was there more or less the entire time that we were, I guess the entire time we were seriously working on the edition, and then more or less the entire time that anything was being done.
Mm-hmm. And before I proceed, I think we have a challenge for our audience.
We do. We have a challenge. This is going to be tough. So, I have a Kickstarter that's coming out on the 26th. That's next Tuesday. And every week on Tuesday, I've generally revealed one of the 12 monsters ancestries that are in the Kickstarter. But next Tuesday is the Kickstarter, so everyone's going to see it then. So I'm willing to reveal the 12th ancestry today. If we hit 100 likes by the end of this video, I'll reveal it here. Otherwise, I'll reveal it in my later interview later today. So you all have the first chance to get to see it, but it's going to be tough.
The final reveal, right? Would that be accurate?
Yes. It is the final reveal for that ancestry, other than the Year of Monsters, other than stretch goals. Because stretch goals are always going to be, like, some of them will be revealed after the Kickstarter.
Okay, and we're going to talk some about that Kickstarter more in depth. I know I'm curious about it. I see the likes ticking up. All right, let's hit 100, and then we'll find we'll see if we get the final reveal. Okay, so these concept docs, what were some other examples of these concept docs?
It was just like
4 degrees of success.
Yeah, it was just like early ideas for various different little things that could be included, like 4 degrees of success, or changing around with what ability scores there were. Some of them were very like wild ideas that were not taken, or like changing the structure of saving throws. There were a lot of early concept docs. Of course, that one wound up being similar to what 5e eventually did with their saving throws, and then it's like, well, 5e already did that.
Oh, so you were on board before 2014, before 5e came out?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Can you drop one of those wild discarded ideas?
I mean, I mentioned that there were ideas. I mean, even the concept doc I had about 4 degrees of success had some elements that weren't included, like glancing blows on strikes, for example, where they did half minimum damage on a failed strike, because no one likes to miss and do nothing. And then there were a lot of support things that were built in into the concept doc around that. You can hear a little bit more about it in Arcane Mark's What If, which we actually did put on YouTube, unlike most of our shows. So we have a What If that is about like some weird ideas that were from early concept docs, or the playtest that didn't make it into Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
I have a link to your Twitch, I believe, in my video description. And you say you also have this on your YouTube channel.
Yes, yes, we
Oh,
do.
okay.
And someone in chat mentioned that the proficiency was initially equal to your level, then plus 1, 2, and 3, but that made it all the way to the playtest. So that's not something that was from. That's not something that was only in an early concept doc. But yes, that's another example of something that was in my What If, where we talked about the early proficiency scheme and what its consequences would have been. Many of which are positive for gameplay, but not as positive for the psychology of people who want to see that big 2-point swing when proficiency goes up.
Yes. Um, did Ooh, I have a question. I'm trying to remember. Um, oh, I have to think that making high level play easier or something was an explicit goal or conversation that you guys had. Is that true?
Yes, it was. It was something that I think everybody wanted to do. It was,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of a grail or thing that like a lot of games wanted to do, but like pretty much very few D&D likes actually succeeded at doing. So it was certainly challenging, and I did a lot of work towards that as well, and put my experience in high level play from previous editions into helping figure it out.
So, would you say it was mostly well? What was your own experience with high level play, and what were you hoping to do?
So I had a lot of experience in high level play because I guess I played at a variety of levels. I know that statistically most people don't play at high levels a lot, but I've been playing since I was younger, which for me, I'm not old enough that means the very beginning. That kind of more means AD&D and a lot of second edition D&D was what I played when I was younger. And we went all the way up to like high levels with that. We had like spells and magic and skills and powers and all of those players option books and like the true dwemmers and all of those other weird things. And we played all the way up to really high levels there. I played ran up to epic levels in 3rd edition and very high levels in 3.5 Pathfinder 1st edition.
And
And
you were the GM.
oh yeah, I was the GM pretty much every time because like I had a very successful game where just things worked out, but that required a level of design capability and skill that I guess was sufficient to make me be one of the like lead creators of Pathfinder 2nd edition. So it's not like a low bar to clear to have a very robust, successful high level game in some of those systems. And for me, even for me, like I couldn't use the challenge rating system in 3rd edition when I was running my epic level group. At one point, they were like level 21 ish. Like some people were only level 20 and had not made it to epic levels. And they fought a CR 40 and they easily won. And then they fought a CR 21 and they almost wiped. It was very hard. And fortunately, I knew this because I play tested all of my encounters myself, just running my players' characters. Like I ran them against the things and saw what happens, and I was like, "Oh, this 21 is going to be really hard. I'll make it a really big story encounter. Oh, this 40 is going to be pretty easy. I will not worry about it too much." So, like, you almost had to ignore the game system and just design things on your own. But if you did, like, the stories could be so epic, the battles could have so many intense and weird things that were going on, but it was very hard. And I wanted that kind of feeling and experience to be something that like any GM could have rather than just someone who's willing to put in the sheer number of hours that I did into my games.
I know for my 22nd level Rapid Atha campaign, I made a spreadsheet averaging everybody's armor class and their attack bonuses that also factored the archer when they use rapid shot, when they don't use rapid shot, like what's their average DPR versus this
Was the
AC
average even valuable? Like, the average armor class, to me, it would seem really useless, because it'd be like, okay, well, the average is 48 because there's a wizard who has only 29, and there's somebody who has 97, and so it's like, okay. When you average those two out, it's in the 50s, but nobody actually has an AC in the 50s because one is 97 and one is 29.
I mean, what ended up happening was I came up with this like guide. Like every time something says level 19, I'm gonna make it level 25, and I'm gonna increase the numbers this metric. It was kind of like it still wasn't perfect in the end, but it was a lot of work. So what I'd like to do is we're going to have our little learn more about the Kickstarter in just 1 second before we go into kind of what you those things that you planned out and hoped to carry out in the design to address high level. So I'm going to show the Kickstarter again on the screen. People can... I don't know if you can see what they're seeing, but it shows the three main products and then a set of boxes of cards. Okay, what I want to say first is that your Dragon Ancestry book has been very popular on my Discord.
Yay!
Yeah, and I have three. I'm running. I'm doing 2 professional GMing campaigns, and in 2 groups. Well, 3 of them. In 3 of them, someone's taken up the Dragon Ancestry. Someone's a Draconic Ravager fighter at level 1 who feels badass at level 1. Wait, no, it's Draconic Diehard.
Ah, yes. So that they do get the Ravager archetype immediately, even at level 1, if they take that class archetype.
And for those who don't know, this it's the Dragon Ancestry book seems to explore some unexplored design space that Paizo books have not explored. So the Dragon Diehard, it's a class archetype where you forego proficiency in weapons and armor in exchange for improved unarmed attacks and scales, and unlocks this whole there's 30 the whole book's how many pages? Like 150?
It's around 136, and my sales pitch for it
lots of feats that you can unlock by taking
my sales pitch is how little is in the book, by which I mean it is an ancestry with 2 archetypes, and there's also a system for using hordes instead of buying treasure. That is the book. And so it's does it have 8 pages that are these are spells that dragons made up, I guess? No, it does not have that. Does it have 4 pages that are these are banners that have a picture of a dragon on it? Nope. It is all about playing dragons. Everything that is in that book is 100% the content towards playing dragons in your game. It's got the rules and the lore that you want to see for that and that you need for that, and that was something that was very important to me about it. There's no filler. It is all content.
Yeah, and then the second character is by Swing Ripper, my co-admin. He has a time dragon wizard mage. And then someone else is a dragon fighter at level 11 who flies around and has Draconic Ravager. For Fists of the Ruby Phoenix. It's been very popular. Nothing I've encountered has seemed broken. I haven't read the book closely, but I was struck by the fact that the Dragon Ancestry has about 20 ancestry feats per level tier. There's a whole lot of feats in this.
There's a lot.
We're beyond...
It has 45 heritages.
Yeah, we're beyond just, your race is a little paragraph. We've gone beyond that.
It's gone beyond plus ultra.
Now I'm gonna before going into the Kickstarter, I'm gonna raise an interesting question that was brought up in my Discord, which was I don't know if it's a question. Someone said they wish Battle Zoo had done the Book of the Dead, which is Paizo's book on undead options, and I mean
it's a book on a lot more than just undead character options, but
yeah, but I think the idea was someone else brought up, is there something intrinsic to being third party that allows you to go to be a little more experimental about design? And if true, how is that shown in the book? The
I
answer
would
could be yes or
say
no.
I would say yes and no and maybe, depending on who's doing it. So, you can certainly do something that is more off the beaten path for the main idea if you're third party, because Paizo is always going to have to be presenting something that is middle of the road in that everybody wants it. Like, it's something that is pretty universally applicable, whereas like dragons are always going to be something that some people really want, but some people are going to be like, nah, not at all.
Yeah, they're only
So,
opponents. They're only epic things sitting on treasure hoards.
yeah,
Some would say.
some people feel that
Yeah.
way, so it could be a big risk for Paizo. But that's not a mechanical. That's not about going wilder mechanically. That's about choosing a more unusual, more strange and unusual niche for the like the high concept of the product. Now, some third parties do want to go into really radical stuff mechanically that is not sometimes like their niche, and this is not Battle Zoo, not Roll for Combat niche, but some third parties' niche is let's do something that violates the design principles of the game and see what happens. See how fun that is to play, what changes that makes. We don't do that. We are very much. Our idea is we're going to give you something that is really dynamic, really different that you wouldn't have expected, and it's going to have exactly the same design principles and standards from Paizo, and I know what those are because, you know, I'm the design manager. I was applying those standards at Paizo for a big part, so I will make sure that we are meeting those standards as well.
Sorry, let me just move my chat screen so I don't have to look back and forth. But yeah, so you're saying that mechanically, I know it was something that was a must for me. I did not want it to warp the mechanics around it, of the system around it, or force me to study something new.
Right.
And
how have dragons been doing in your games? Are they doing well? Are they giving a real fantasy that fulfills the fantasy of dragons, but staying at a power level that seems fitting with other characters?
Swing Whipper should comment, but I feel like yes, I would say so. And they've had dragony moments, like doing a big old bite in Fist of the Ruby Phoenix, biting an umbral dragon, biting somebody and taking their life force. That was cool.
Nice.
Which also doubles as their breath weapon, which does negative energy. Yeah. Anyway, I was just really impressed. I took a closer look at it today in preparation for this interview, and just, how many types of dragons are there? It's like 40?
There are 45.
Okay.
45.
Yeah.
And those are 45 heritages for dragon. There's also the draconic scion versatile heritage for non-dragons who are part dragon. They're like a like a half dragon or some kind of draconian creature. Not necessarily genetically. There's numerous ways that you don't have to have your grandparents like sleeping with dragons in order to become a draconic scion.
Okay, Swing Whipper says, I feel like Dragon Mage feels more like a mage that happens to be a dragon, but that is to be expected. I love Draconic Ravager, though. Draconic Ravager better fits with my idea of what a dragon ought to be. And yeah, Draconic Ravager is a class archetype that, it seems like it puts more into the power of the traditional dragon abilities at the sacrifice of what you get from your class.
There's certainly a reason why.
I'm sorry, I was talking about Die Hard. You should go
ahead.
Well,
no, Draconic Ravager also lets you spend feats on being class a dragon feats instead of your class, and it's class feats. That's because with Ancestry feats, there's a limit to what you can do because those are not meant to. Ancestry feats have never been meant to like overpower your class, such that it's like, well, it doesn't matter if you're an elf fighter or an elf barbarian. You're an elf, so you'll be more similar. So no, that's not how the game is meant to be. So you need something that uses class feats if you want to go heavily into being like your Ancestry. Ravager, I think, just shows that it was the correct decision in Pathfinder's 2nd edition to focus on that draconic frenzy aspect of dragons rather than the they have a million spells aspect. Because in Pathfinder 1st edition, sort of like the default dragons all had a million spells. But in 2nd edition, the default ones go for the frenzy, and then you can choose to switch that out for the spells in a sidebar. And the fact of what Swing Ripper is saying, I think, shows it resonates with the design choices that we made in Pathfinder 2nd Edition to make the non-spell dragon the default. It's also easier to run.
We're about to talk about that part of the Kickstarter, the Year of Monsters, and a reminder to the audience: we need 100 likes to get Mark to convince Mark to give us the final reveal of the 12th monster.
I will give the final reveal if we get 100, and it looks like we're almost 2/3 of the way there.
Yeah.
So
first
we've got a chance.
We really love the Dragon book, but how does each installment compare to that? I imagine they can't each be as massive as that book.
They're not even close.
Okay.
They're not even close. So, but let's talk about how there are installments and what Year of Monsters is. For the Kickstarter, there's 3 major separate things that are in the Kickstarter, each of which may have multiple products. So Year of Monsters, the idea came, it's like, this year has been really tough. Just every few weeks, something really awful seems to happen. We were thinking, what if 2023 at least had something good that was always coming in your inbox? And Year of Monsters is our attempt to sort of do that. So every month, a new monstrous ancestry will show up. You'll get a PDF, and there's going to be 1 Foundry module, not like 12. You download it once, and it'll automatically update with the new monster as soon as that monster hits. So you get Foundry for it as well. That Foundry integration is like really tied in. Like if you're like, I do not like Foundry, Sam I am, and I will not use it. There is a way to build your own bundle to avoid buying the Foundry module, but I don't recommend it since you get such a good discount on, or it's not build your own bundle, build your own tier. On pledging one of the actual tiers that you might as well get the Foundry, but the Foundry, I haven't seen very many other people who put in a premium module and are just like, this is not an add-on, this is actually part of what you get on the regular tier. And then another aspect of it is we're going to do special, behind the scenes, but also decision-making streams that when you're in Year of Monsters, it's sort of like a club, because you get these private streams with me and with Steven, and we're going to talk about the Ancestry. And when we have stretch goals, the stretch goals are going to allow them to get expanded, but not at first. So you read the original Ancestry and then come to the stream and they're like, oh, well, some of them can be expanded, right? Let's say demons get expanded. It's like, what are you what's missing in demon? Where do you want us to use that extra expansion? And then at the end of the year, all 12 of the Ancestries are going to be compiled and expanded with the stretch goals and other things into a hardcover.
Nice. That
you will also get the PDF, or if you bought the tier that had the hardcover. So you get everything.
So it'll involve a big community contribution, too.
Yes, because people will be able to talk about what they wanted. And so
was that part of the Dragon book, developing that?
Well, we had playtest, but we didn't have streams like this, so it's a little bit more advanced. But the playtesters absolutely gave a lot of great ideas for the Dragon book. But for combat and when working on Battle Zoo, one of the design principles that I had early on, even when I was just a freelancer working on my part at the end of Battle Zoo Bestiary with the monster parts, is that the viewer, the person who is reading the product, are part of the design team, and you are making design decisions, and you are empowered to make choices. And that's why I put in so many sidebars on the monster crafting that was like, what if you wanted to use this with automatic bonus progression, or with the relic system, or you want to mix and match? And I didn't just rebuild the economy once, I rebuilt it 3 times in case you wanted lots of monster parts, or just a little, or halfway in between. So we're all about customization, and that is part of why we're gonna have those streams, and people can just tell us what they want to see at it. Wow, we're at 75 now. Yeah. We really could make it to 100 and get the final reveal 100 likes.
So 2 questions on Year of Monsters. First, I'm looking at the core rulebook. Each core ancestry has 4 pages. Is that kind of what we'll expect in the initial PDF?
So each core ancestry is 4 pages. If you're lucky, they sometimes are getting 6. And I did some shenanigans to get the automaton 8 in Guns and Gears, but that was mostly due to other weird stuff that was happening in Guns and Gears and the fact that the turnover was close. But Paizo just can't fit that many pages per ancestry. In fact, like for Lost Omens Ancestry Guide at the meeting when we were discussing the book, I tried and temporarily convinced everyone to give more than 6 pages per ancestry. But then when they saw how few ancestries would fit in the book, it got reduced back again. Because wait, we can't include X and Y and Z, and I totally get it. And people you're probably happy because some of your favorite ancestries would have not been in the book if I had had my
for your
my thoughts. But now for Battle Zoo, we don't have those space limitations, right? So our standard size is always, for an ancestry, is always like 10 to 12 usually pages.
More.
Yes, they're bigger. That's our standard size. That's if we don't get expanded.
Okay.
If an ancestry gets expanded, it's going to be longer than that.
Yeah.
So I have stretch goals that are in there that could possibly get super size, which is like more like around 20. Super duper size, which could be around 30, and then some are able to go super duper size plus also like some other extra things that might put them up to 40. So
great. So we're 20 likes away from getting the 12th reveal, but what are the first 11?
Okay, so I will tell you what the first 11 of them are. In order of reveal, we started out by talking about that this even existed and telling people that demons are in there, gremlins are in there, intelligent weapons are in there as an ancestry, and then dungeons expanded because
oh yes.
For those of you who don't know, you can go to battlezoo.com and get the dungeon ancestry for free. We released it on April Fool's Day, but it is a real product. There's a real ancestry. You can play it is much longer than a usual Paizo ancestry, and it doesn't cost you anything. But we're going to expand it as well. And those are the first 4 that we revealed. Then every week, after the announcement, we revealed another one. So we revealed Oni, Nymphs, Doppelgangers.
Ooh.
We revealed Minotaurs, Slimes, Thenos, which, if you remember from Bestiary 3, are a Medusa kin. And then we revealed Mimics. So those are the 11 ancestries that we revealed.
I already see some of my students wanting to be a slime. They really like the idea of being a dungeon. The idea of an intelligent weapon's really fun sounding. I wonder if there could be a familiar ancestry, just someone filling in that, or an animal companion. but that
I don't think that the ancestry would be animal companion or familiar. It would, but you could do like an awakened animal ancestry, but then it wouldn't be a companion because it would be an awakened animal. Because once you're a companion, then you're kind of a minion at that point.
All right, so that's Year of Monsters. Now, I'm going to be honest.
And there's one more, and we're real close to me revealing it. So I'll tell you what it is. I think we're going to make it. I mean, there's 83 people watching now.
Okay, the other 2 parts are... I'm kind of... next, let's talk about Strange and Unusual. And I'll be honest, I don't feel a need to have more bestiaries, and so, I think this is, a great opportunity to say, make your case. And,
all right.
And also, how would this compare to the bestiary that you guys have already put out?
All right, so I'll make my case, and the first thing that I'll say is like, a lot of people do want more bestiary. So if fundamentally you do not want another bestiary and you just like, I have more than enough monsters, I don't need any new monsters, you might not need Strange and Unusual. I'm gonna be fair. I'm not gonna try to say that it's for literally everyone, but a lot of people that I've talked to, and I know that Steven is on this boat, are of the opinion that you can never have too many monsters because they give you more options for every level, range, environment, or situation. If you need to throw like a random fight. They each give you inspiration that can make new stories. And if you are at all interested in the possibility of adding more monsters, I think Strange and Unusual is great because it's got the RPG Superstar winners. So these are like new and aspiring authors who, many of whom, I mean, if you're veteran enough in the industry, you're not allowed to compete. So these are new people trying to get in, and they won the contest, which was very selective this year. So it's 150 plus award-winning monsters. An interesting thing, just from the purpose of being a designer of monsters, is that you can see the version of their monster that won the contest and has not had a professional design pass by me done on them. It's just on the website rpgsuperstar.com. So if you get the final book, you can compare and contrast. You can see what got changed, and that can help you understand part of the design process as well. But there's going to be a bunch of monsters in there. That's not all. If you like the monster part system from Battle Zoo Bestiary, the original, where you can get weird parts from monsters you defeat or potentially befriend, like an angel gives you one of its feathers freely given or something like that, and then make items out of them. So we're going to have more imbued properties and just expand that system in Strange and Unusual, plus other goodies like the Aberrant Soul archetype for if you're slowly transforming into an aberration. Like that, you do,
Yeah, this can reflect my real life.
Yeah. Now, that's Battle Zoo Bestiary Strange and Unusual. To compare to the original Battle Zoo Bestiary, I would say it's both stranger and more unusual than the other one.
I was going to say, is it just those who won, in 2021 versus 2020, or did you save some from the first book to fit a more themed book?
No, it is 2021 versus it's I think maybe 2019 was when the first one was. I can't remember anymore when the timings were, but it may have been 2020 and 2021. But no, the theme was indicated to in the second RPG Superstar. And we already know what the theme is for the upcoming 2022 RPG Superstar.
So for the contest participants, they were given an ask.
They were told Strange and Unusual,
okay.
and then you decide what that is. And a lot of contestants had different opinions, which was great because we didn't want everything to be like a tentacle monster. Then it would be really samey. But everyone had really different opinions of what was Strange and Unusual, and that was perfect. And there's sometime in the next few months, probably, the next RPG Superstar will start, and you watching this can participate unless you have your name on the cover of an RPG book or credits in 3 RPG books or something like that. You can check the rules. I don't remember them exactly. And the next one is going to be, the theme is actually tying into the third kind of product that we're about to talk about. The theme is something that matches one of the 10 to 20 elements they're not just fire, earth, water, and air. And this is not about elementals, but matching these elements, which are sort of like types that we're using for Eldamon, the final type, the final product. This is because Eldamon like hanging out inside of creatures, items, or locations that are associated with their element, which could be like music or time. So your monster could be like a fae that plays music, or a weird time-based monster, or any of those 20 themes for this year's RPG Superstar. And that becomes helpful because those are places where you could find the Eldamon that is associated with that. And what are Eldamon?
Let's talk about Eldamon. And that sounds a lot like the word Pokemon.
Well, the similarity is because the mon at the end of both of them stands for monster.
Nice.
So, Eldamon are these sort of like ancient and playful creatures. They are related to the this set of elements that are associated with them, which are not the same as like the elemental planes, because it does have fire, water, and air and earth, but also has like cold and electricity, life and death. And we've got some stretch goals to go from 10 up to 20 elements, and that would add like time and space and music and body and all sorts of other weird quote elements for these Eldamon. And so the thing about them is that they absolutely are these monsters that inhabit the world, that you can befriend them and try to collect them. But we wanted to make sure that this was something that you could easily add to your game in a way that was not disruptive. Because a lot of other takes on this that I've heard people talking about that were doing homebrew either fell into one of two camps, both of which were kind of disruptive. One of them was just like, well, if you want to find and catch these monsters, the GM has to, like, change the adventure so that you're fighting against them. Because in Pokemon, you know, you beat the stuffing out of a creature and then, like, enslave it inside of some kind of a prison to force it to fight for you. And we did not want you to, I mean, not only is that kind of bad when you think about it, but we also didn't want you to have, the GM to have to, like, change the encounters. And in some other homebrew takes that I've heard about, like, they're just like, oh, you catch the monsters from the bestiary. Yeah, that might not always be balanced. Use your best judgment. And so we wanted them to be, like, a new thing that was specifically created so that it was appropriate and fun for you to find and befriend and use them, and at the same time that it did not require the GM to do a lot of work if they didn't want to, but instead the just one player who's interested in Eldamon could handle it all themselves if no one else was interested in, like, supporting and handling the logistics of it.
So I think people are interested kind of in the idea of, you know, collectible monsters. So mechanically, how is this expressed? And so you can have one and you can collect more, it sounds like.
So here's the idea. Instead of you have to, like, fight a lotus snake, which is like the little flower snake from the wood element, what happens is they live in the world, and like I mentioned before when I was talking about RPG Superstar, they love to inhabit creatures, objects, items, locations that are associated with their element, right? Sometimes even if it's not associated with their element, but usually if it's associated with their element. So what does that mean? What it means is that we can just say, after you fight an encounter and fight creatures and or find a flame tongue or beat a fire giant or go to a volcano, there's a chance that you find a fire Eldamon. We have tables so that the GM can have the player roll on the tables. You can also just sort of say every level I'll let you gain a certain number, but the tables let you really make more of a story of it, where you're actually finding them, and they'll just pop out. Usually if they get interested because someone picked up the item they were inside, or someone defeated the creature that they were hanging out inside. They're out of phase with normal reality, so they just sort of can enter into creatures and items and things like that. So basically, yeah, you beat a fire giant and suddenly a squirrel ash, like a fire squirrel, might pop out, and you have a chance to try to befriend it at that point in time. So it just can sort of happen naturally because of the story and the lore of what Eldamon are and how they work. But we didn't want to just, like, say that they meld into things and have no effect of that, because we want to follow the story where it goes. So what if an Eldamon just sticks around in a weapon for a long time? Well, maybe it becomes a fire relic if your fire Eldamon stays in there for a while. It doesn't always become such an item, but it could. Then there is, what if it stays inside of a monster? Well, first of all, you might not have figured out there was an Eldamon there until afterwards when rolling the table if the player's doing it, so you don't have to do any of these. But if the GM is actually invested in Eldamon and wants to put them in ahead of time, they can be like, well, this monster had an Eldamon in there a long time. It has one of the Eldamon's special fire abilities were added to this fire giant, for example. And what if it stays inside of you? Like, right? What if, Ronald, what if you had an Eldamon inside of you for a few years? Well, it's possible you develop elemental powers. And that's why, in addition to the Eldamon trainer class, which fights by phasing themselves out and their Eldamon in to battle against the monsters, there's an elemental avatar class where you've got an Eldamon that's kind of like quiescent inside of you, and you can meditate to try to contact it. But, like, you just have these elemental powers, which could be like time or music or something like that, right? Not just classic elements. And you can use them yourself. And I think that's a good one also for GMs who are just like, I don't like little monsters. they're too cute for my game. But you're like, okay, but do you like 10 to 20 different elements, each of which have different play styles that are unique and distinct from each other? Yes, I do like that, but I don't like the monsters. Well, you can use Elemental Avatar. You never have to see the monsters at that point in time.
I have a question about that, but I need to acknowledge we reached our goal of 100.
We did it!
Thank you,
We
chat.
did it! I knew we could do it. So, given that we reached the goal of 100, I will now tell you the 12th Ancestry. It was the hardest one. It's almost impossible to guess. Even after I gave clues, nobody guessed it. Because the clues were still hard. So, all the other Ancestries so far have either been like a type of item like intelligent weapon, or some kind of major monster family, or specific monster that was famous and everyone would possibly be able to guess. In fact, almost all of them were guessed. But this one is a type of creature that, while there are a few in Pathfinder that have showed up, they have never been classified together as a single monster family. They've just sort of been separately with this word in their name. And Pathfinder hasn't explored this family in the way that some other fiction has. So, the 12th Ancestry is She. Sidhe. That is the sort of fairy nobles that are kind of an important aspect of Fey mythology. So we have Leonanshi in Pathfinder, and there's also Bivanshi in Pathfinder. And so Leonanshi are like she who like help inspire artists, but then they die young. And Bivanshi are like dancing Fae who also drink the blood of people. So yes, so we've got she, and it goes along with nymphs and gremlins, and sprites are already in Ancestry, so now we'll have all the main flavors of
Are they tiny?
So no, they're kind of like seen as the nobility of Fae, so they are more like the size of like a normal humanoid, rather than being tiny.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mark, for gracing us with that news.
Thanks to everyone for getting to 100. That's never easy on a concurrent live stream. So you guys got it. I offered it here, and you have achieved and succeeded at the goal that I set. And Ronald was like, I don't know if we'll make 100, and I said, I don't know either. Let's find out.
I was going to propose 50. But I should never underestimate my viewers ever again.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of getting the big reveal. So
don't underestimate the power of greed.
Greed? Okay. So there was a question about the elemental avatar that we were talking about before. It's going to be in the Eldamon book. It's going to be another way to use the special elemental powers that we're going to create for the Eldamon themselves, if you want to use them yourself. Like, as a... I'm a character and I have these elemental powers because of the Eldamon that's within me.
So I know the monster part system, for a GM concerned about how it fits in their game and balance, those were easily translatable into kind of item prices and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It gave everything you needed.
I mean, our Eldamon... I initially thought they were going to be creatures that you could let loose into battle.
So they're out of phase with reality, which means that in general you don't fight them. Now it's possible for an ancient Eldamon to manage to phase in on its own, and like you could create an encounter out of that and create a creature out of it, but it's very unusual. Compared to normal, they'll play fight each other just to see, or like to dispute, where it's like, well, let's see who gets to hang out in this like sunny area that we both want to hang out in, and they can do a play fight where they're shooting out meteors and other things like that, but it doesn't really harm the environment because they're phased out of reality, and they themselves are de-energized and weakened, and they have to rest after a fight like that, but they're not gonna like get bloody or killed because they're unusual beings of elemental energies. But you can phase them into reality to fight against real monsters if you have the Eldamon trainer class. Now, how does this benefit this distinction? It means that if your barbarian or your wizard wants to collect and befriend every single Eldamon, and you do not want to lose any of your barbarian or your wizard feats or spells or things for that, you don't have to worry about it, because there's no cost to having Eldamon. If you can't, like, manifest them and make them fight, it doesn't actually make you stronger in a battle. And so you could just have them, and they'll hang out with you. But if you want to have them come help you, you take the Eldamon Trainer class or the multi-class archetype.
Okay, great. Anything more you want to say about the kick? Okay, July 26th, right, is when it launches?
Yeah, it's Tuesday, July 26th. There's a link to it, but it's on Kickstarter. You can find it there. The Eldamon.com is how you get our newsletter, where we always have like new content and other information. Also, this is not all, because we have failed to mention that that Eldamon also has a card game that's associated with it, that is a sort of stylized version of an Eldamon battle where one Eldamon fights another using the same moves from the RPG, but translated into a card game version that runs super quickly. It's focused on sort of psyching out your opponent by figuring out what possible strategies they can use and playing your moves at the right time to sort of counter them or to sort of get an advantage over them. And it is system agnostic. So if you are a Pathfinder 2nd Edition player and you think that your Eldamon team is the best there ever was, but your friend who's a 5e player thinks that theirs is much better and that obviously theirs is better, then you can both go to the card game, and it sort of, as a lingua franca, can translate between the two, and you can battle each other and prove
Edition
once and for all. Yes. And people in chat are saying, oh no, collectible card game. So it's not randomized, it's not collectible in the sense that you have to like chase after rares. You want to get all the Fire and Ice Eldamon in their moves? Great. Just buy Fire and Ice. You get them all, including the ones that are rare in game. We're not gonna make you like randomize in packs and do things like that, or any of the other like kind of scummy psychological tactics to get more money from people. We want you to experience the fun of being able to go after sort of collectible creatures, some of which are rarer than others, without having to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. And I saw there was a promotional picture that in the packet you sent me that said first 48 hours. Can I show that? And you want to?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's more than just that too. So there's 6 plushies of Eldamon, which are really cool, made by the people who made Tentacle Kitty and the Gallant Goblins Kobolds. There's 10 miniatures. There's dice sets that are themed after the card decks. And first 48 hours, go ahead and show it. There's a really cool, it's a hard dice case that you can use to keep a specific or special die set in there. Okay. So you get that automatically if you pledge in the first 48 hours. So that's pretty handy.
Okay, great. So one more time. So if people want to get a reminder when it launches, they should go to...
So Eldamon.com is a place to get... you can get our newsletter. The actual site is just a long thing that I don't think I can post. So I'll post it to you in Discord, and then you can post it.
Okay.
So the actual Kickstarter site... Yeah, the actual Kickstarter site is here. I linked it to you in Discord, and that will let you click to be reminded by Kickstarter, which is only a small thing that they do. But Eldamon.com's got our newsletter, which always has new content. And then Battlezoo.com you can go to right now and get dragons, or the free dungeons are on there. And I put all of those in our Discord chat. If you go to Kickstarter.rollforcombat.com, that's also going to take you to our Kickstarter. So that's easier than the longer link. Kickstarter.rollforcombat.com is an alias that goes right to the Kickstarter now.
Nice. So I'm just working on that. Wait, actually, the Discord, I cannot... It's... my OBS is looking at the Discord, so I can't really...
Oh, so you can't look at the Discord. Okay, so Kickstarter.rollforcombat.com will go to the Kickstarter. Eldamon.com goes to the newsletter, and Battlezoo.com goes to the store, where you can get everything that's currently out right away.
So what I caught was kickstarter.rollforcombat.com. I will put that in the chat. Okay. All right. Okay, so back to our investigation, our examination.
Okay.
Okay.
Dun dun.
All right. I put up my Law and Order thing again. Wait, let me move some things around on my screen. Hold on. Dun dun. Okay, so you were saying that it sounded like you had saw it as a part of your job to address high-level play and came up with some ideas. What were some of those?
So, when it comes to high-level play, I felt like, you know, all the things that you've said, we've all seen that there are issues that come up when you attempt to do high-level play, and I wanted to try to solve some of those issues as best I could. So, you talked about rocket tag, you talked about certain things getting out of control, and that is kind of what I was going for. So, when we're looking at those factors, they have kind of been in common for almost every D&D in the history of D&D. I've heard that 4th edition had it somewhat less, but my 4th edition games never made it to high levels, unlike my AD&D and 3rd and Pathfinder 1st. So I can't really say. I have heard that it did a better job with that in terms of keeping the highest levels from being completely sort of infeasible for most GMs. And when I say infeasible, I ran it, I liked it, I loved it, my group loved it. It took many hours. And it's completely fair to say that prepping a Pathfinder 1st edition adventure path in 2nd edition took me way less time than prepping it in 1st edition. Mm-hmm. Even though it's written in 1st edition.
I'm finding that as I convert Rise of the Rune Lords for one of my groups.
Yeah, it's super easy to just convert it. I could eventually do it on the fly with no prep. Whereas in 1st edition, I needed to spend hours and hours and hours of prep rewriting everything so that it would be an interesting situation for my group. And before that, when I went to epic levels and stuff, I just wrote my own content until doing some Pathfinder APs. But when I was doing APs, I also had to rewrite pretty much everything. So that's basically where I was coming from on that. And you talked a little bit about the fact that the asymmetry between classes can mean that there's a different feel of what the classes are accomplishing both in and out of combat at various level ranges. That's certainly true. And there were two schools of thought that I noticed among people who thought there was a disparity between casters and martial characters in, say, 3rd edition, Pathfinder 1st edition, and so on. One of which was objectively not correct about how to make high-level play feasible, but was also very popular. So the schools of thought both said, okay, spellcasters are just auto-winning as soon as they can go. So you even went into this a little. So martials are not necessarily auto-winning. I mean, sometimes they are when they do hundreds and hundreds of damage. And then out of combat, spellcasters are just skipping everything and trivializing the entire plot. So how do we fix this issue? So some people said, well, we fix it by making marshals also auto-win as soon as they have their first turn and also trivialize every plot. And that is exactly the wrong answer if you want to actually have a game where there's a variety of different roles that people can play in combat, where it's not all about just blitz and go and just win, where defense, healing, and some of those other types of things can be important. And where skills and investigation and working together can be important outside of combat. So the other solution was maybe we should bring some of those things that are making everything end immediately, or just ending, or trivializing some of the out-of-combat stuff and making skills not matter, under control for spellcasters. And that's sort of what we did in Pathfinder 2nd edition. We did both. We definitely buffed up what other people could do, but we did not buff them up to the problematic levels of this is breaking everything. We buffed them to where we wanted them to be, and then we brought spellcasting down to meet that.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like, and for certain things that just sort of were traditional to have in the game that we didn't want to cut entirely, became uncommon. To say that like, look, yes, this really can throw off certain plots, so
Like
you know,
teleport.
include it at your own risk. Yeah, like teleport. So Jade Region is one of the adventure paths I ran in Pathfinder First Edition, and the amount that I house ruled led to like an entire third-party product that I released on a new relationship system, and the caravan system didn't like literally actually didn't work at higher levels, and you just kind of your caravan automatically died if you ran it as written. I made a new one for that I never released, but beyond that also, like the authors of it very cannily realized that a journey adventure path was really pointless with teleport, so they had to create like these contrivances where it's like, well, you're carrying a special artifact that cannot be teleported, and you absolutely need to get the artifact to the end destination. So that's why you can't use teleportation. And like, it worked for that story, but you can't always do that, and it can get a little weird if it's like, well, we have teleportation, but we're going to keep giving an excuse to not have it because we want to tell a journey, like a story about a long journey. Or instead, you can just be like, well, it's uncommon, and therefore your group doesn't have it, and we're going to do a story about a long journey. So one of the things that helps with high-level play is rarity, straight off. Because you can decide what to include, and certain things that would distort the high-level adventure you wanted to run, you could just not include. Just like the assumption that certain spells can be included or not, even if they're not listed as uncommon, it gives GMs more of a sense of like, hey, I can change which ones are uncommon in my game. Whereas in Pathfinder First Edition, there was kind of like this sort of onus or pressure that was like, you must allow everything that's ever been printed anywhere into the game, or else you're being a tyrannical GM. Because the game didn't talk about that. It didn't start the conversation about what should you have in the game, and so there were a lot of assumptions that the answer was everything always. And so that's inherently going to help high-level play, just on its own. No matter what else you do, that's going to be a
When you
that's going to
talked
be a big
about
thing.
powering down magic, save or die, save or suck. The incapacitation trait has been vital. What you say to?
Oh yeah,
Because,
incapacitation is very important.
And the 4 degrees of success, you can keep some of the things that take you out of the fight in the game, but you can hide that behind a critical result also. And then
Yes.
For the incapacitation trait, was that something early in the design process you guys knew what you were going to do?
We added it after the playtest, to be frank.
Oh,
that was
I
something
didn't know
that
it was not in the playtest.
yeah, it wasn't. It was very useful. It was good. But the incapacitation trait is very helpful, and it's also helpful for players because, let me tell you something. In Pathfinder First Edition, yes, like I said, a lot of times someone could go and then just win the fight if the PCs did it. But on the flip side, there were a lot of incapacitation-y monsters that you could spam a bunch of them that were lower level than the party and almost be guaranteed to wipe the party with them. Mm-hmm. And so this protects the PCs from just that situation happening in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Something like 6 Harpies in Pathfinder 1st Edition. It's like, yeah, sure. At the time when you're fighting 6 Harpies, some of your characters probably only need like a 2 or a 3 on the D20 to save against the 6 Harpies. But even then, your chances of failing are pretty high because you have to roll 6 times. So Pathfinder 2nd Edition Incapacitation helps with that. But the 4 degrees of success help even more. They were crucial towards making the save or lose spells actually fit in the game in a way that is not terrible. And by terrible, I don't mean that anybody who designed any other D&D like did anything wrong when they were trying to design save or loses. Save or loses are tough to deal with because of the fact that especially they have names and traditions based on that OD&D where it's just like, yeah, it was supposed to automatically win. And so when you're designing a spell that says it kills someone or that it does something like paralyze them where they basically have lost once they're paralyzed. It's you're already at a really hard design decision. And the original way of doing it, save or lose, was pretty bad. It was bad because your group, from most groups, felt kind of really lousy no matter what happens, and you feel lousy some of the time. By which I mean, let's say you have a save or lose effect, and you throw it out there, and the opponent fails the save, and they lose. Well, now the rest of your group is like, well, okay, I guess I didn't get a chance to do anything, so they're not having fun. You probably did have fun. Let's say they made it, and nothing happens to them. Then everyone's like, wow, you just wasted your turn, way to go. And then they're not having fun, because you wasted your turn, and you're not having fun, because you didn't do anything. So with degrees of success, we can take those two situations, both of which are actually kind of terrible, and make them be kind of the extreme edge cases. And we can put in two cases that are fun in to be the ones that we're actually deciding between most of the time. And so, and a failed save can be the thing that's like, oh yeah, that's good. It's not over. The fight's not over, but we're in a good shape. And for a successful save, it can be like, okay, that could have been better, but this is still going to help. And I didn't do nothing, I did something useful, especially if it's against an opponent who's likely to succeed, like a boss. Like, even just taking one action off of a boss on some of the spells that make you lose one action on a successful save is good. You spend 2 actions for the boss's 1 action, the solo boss. That's great. Your group has like 4 times as many actions as the boss does, so it's very efficient. And you can probably combine that with things like moving around or other strategies to really ruin the boss's day. So that is something that was super important for high-level play. You might not think of it as being something that enables high-level play, but it is. Because as you go up to those higher levels, you're getting spells with names that kind of force it to have a really unfun effect, and you can sort of banish them to the critical failure realm, so that they don't come up as much during play, and make it so that it's not fun for the players when it hits them. Like, when I was playing Pathfinder First Edition, I had an archer in Pathfinder Society, and my archer killed like pretty much anything when she got a turn. And her saves were incredibly high, because she was also a monk. I pretty much never failed a save. When I did, I had a reroll, because I was wearing the correct shirt for a reroll in Pathfinder Society First Edition. but I got hit by a Glabrazoo with a power word stun, and there was no save.
No save.
And I was stunned for like 6 rounds. So I went and got lunch, and when I came back, I was still stunned.
I'll say this: when the playtest first came out, I was not for adding your level to your stats. I thought, I don't know. I think I didn't like the, I was into the school of thought of bounded accuracy lets you have low-level monsters still stay relevant as the party becomes high level. However, I think I'm completely left that view now. Because the other side of that too, at least what I've experienced playing more 5th edition, is that first of all, I'm not sure goblins really challenge a 20th level party in that system, first of all. But it also means that the math gets so flat that that the 6th level party can defeat something much higher level. Like, all of these things have its opposite effect that may not be desirable. So like what you just said about, well, incapacitation might feel bad when your spell against a high level monster fails, but how would you feel if some level 1 casters, paralyze, or very low level casters?
A ghoul is a great example of TPK
Mm-hmm.
bait in Pathfinder First Edition, because it would make 3 attacks, and its paralyzed DC wasn't that high, but if it could hit you, and there were a bunch of ghouls, you probably got paralyzed by it.
Yeah, and I think people who think badly about the trait, it's just because their first experience with it is usually being on the receiving end, because you start low level. And incapacitation effects are usually, I mean, it seems like it's more for protecting the players in reality, protecting the PCs.
It's both. It's protecting whoever is in sort of the position where they would otherwise be overwhelmed by having to make a large number of easy rolls, one of which just took them down. But in reality, the players are the ones over the course of the campaign who have to do that the most, and who can for whom variance is bad.
Yes.
So yes, over the course of the entire campaign, yeah. So yes, if you took out Incapacitation, it would make some fights easier, but you would probably be more likely to TPK at some point as well. So
yes,
it protects you in the long term, even if there are more overall times when it didn't protect you, because the one time that it protected you could have been a wipe for the entire party.
Another thing that I thought about one of the design decisions of Pathfinder 2, the 3-action system is often praised for giving you more flexibility in combat, giving even a level 1 character the opportunity to attack more than once. But I also thought of the fact that I'm not having to deal with an archer attacking 8 times in a round at high level anymore.
Yeah, I mean, eight's pretty good. We had a situation in Pathfinder First Edition where one of the cohorts, who was a fighter, an Aldori duelist fighter with snake style, once attacked a mythic will-o-wisp. We weren't mythic, but the enemies were, because that was I was playing, and the GM at the time, Linda, knew that we could take down mythic things. And that one attack caused an additional 26 attacks to occur before we could finish resolving that attack. And then the fighter continued attacking and made like a total more attacks. But it literally made 26 attacks occur. This is not like me picking 26 as an arbitrary amount. It's because the fighter had plus 12 dexterity modifier, and so had 13 attacks of opportunity. And what happened was, the mythic will-o-wisp, anytime you attack it, it attacks you. With an attack of opportunity, it has an infinite number. And the fighter, anytime you miss her, she attacks you, and she had 13. So you can see that was 13 on one side, 13 on the other side. And then the fighter ran out and stopped. Actually, I guess, does that mean that there were 27? There might have been 27, because the wisp could have made one more at that point.
So what I was thinking was that, like, because you only have one attack at your high bonus, unless you have some feats, but at all levels, from 1 through 20, that has to have made it easier to balance the rate at which people do more damage as they level up. For designing monsters, for designing how much damage players are expected to be able to dish out, because you don't know. I mean, in older editions, you would get a second attack at level 5, 6, or 7, and that would have a huge effect on the.
It sure would.
A huge spike in the player's power, and
it's incredibly spiky.
Yeah, so I almost want to use the word bounded actions for Pathfinder too, because that's a more predictable part of the game. How many actual attacks doing damage the players can do, and also monsters.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, even not talking about iterative attacks, in some of those editions, just like the sheer idea that like your elbow has like a spike on it means that you get an extra attack, or maybe 2 extra attacks for each, because if you have 2 elbows. And so you could easily have a first level character in Pathfinder First Edition with 7 attacks, because they managed to get horns and also claws and a bite and elbows or wings or something. Like, I mean, it wasn't that easy to have 7 attacks, but you could have 7 attacks.
So is there a big chart? Do you have a war room, and did you have a war room in the Paizo offices showing how much damage characters should be doing at certain levels, and what their attack bonuses will be?
There's not a war room, joking. But I mean, we made spreadsheets.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Like, we figured things out. And you're
Yeah.
right when you said before that adding level really does a lot for you that you don't think about. One of the things it does to help is it helps allow an economy of experience points, gold pieces, and monsters to sort of fit in with each other. We discussed this somewhat on day one. The fact that we were able to create a situation where go up 2 levels and the monster is worth about twice as much in terms of how dangerous it is, required both a polynomial element and a little bit of an exponential element as well that the math kind of creates for you. And this is hugely important because of the fact that let's talk about those monster parts that are in the Battle Zoo Bestiary, right? I made it for Pathfinder 2nd edition. It was worked quite well, quite easily. Said, okay, you kill a monster of this level, here's how many parts you get. But guess what? In 5e, you actually can't. And when I say can't, I mean we had the people from Level Up who had done a huge analysis of the 5e economy, and they tried. We told them they had to, and they did their best.
The advanced 5e group?
Yes.
Yeah.
They gave us an analysis, and I looked at it, and they were like, yeah, there's some issues. And they were right, because the problem is that when you when you have bounded accuracy, and when you have a situation where at level 5, when you're just coming out of it being like the hometown heroes tier in 5e, and you're about to go on to being like local heroes instead of like the starting fledgling people, you might fight an Adiug, and that's considered like a standard encounter for you. But when you're at level 15 and you're 1 level away from being considered like the champions of the entire multiverse, you might fight 3 Adiugs. And that could be considered like the equally challenging encounter by the system. So the problem is, though, that the amount of value of a magic item that you would generally find at those levels, when the level up people reverse engineered to figure out like where it was going based on some of those tables, is about like 100 to 1,000 times more expensive. But you're only fighting 3 times as many monsters. So it turned out that it was actually literally impossible to do an amount of gold per monster in 5e that would work. And if you think, but wait, there's an individual monster award in the Dungeon Master's Guide, right? So how could it not work? The answer that I was curious about that myself. So I did an analysis and discovered the way that works is that the amount that is given is so paltry in the individual monster award. And this is a very smart way that they did it. It's so paltry compared to the overall amount that you get from Horde and Lair treasures that it's always irrelevant. And so therefore it works fine because it's just so much lower than everything else that it doesn't matter that, yes, you might fight 3 Atiugs and get 3 times the amount for a level 5, or you might fight a level 15 creature. But for us, it would have meant that if we did it by creature and said a level 15 creature is worth 100 times more, level 5, that you could have like a 33 times disparity depending on what the GM threw. So we wound up doing it per encounter instead of per creature, based on the severity of the encounter, and like the in-world story about that is also higher level characters, are more heroic and also more able to understand like the weird parts that sometimes go bad almost immediately when you kill the creature, and they can harvest and take advantage of them. But it was something that just didn't work
So
the
what
way
I'm
we
trying
wanted
to gather
it to.
is that you couldn't fix the value of the parts to the level of the monster.
Of the creature.
It had to be.
And you cannot do that in 5e.
It had to refer to the party's level.
Correct. The only way to do it is to do like what D&D themselves did, because they're smart and they know how to do the math, and they made it very low. But we wanted something that was very high and could replace all of your magic items if you wanted to be a possibility. And in order to do that, you actually can't do it monster per monster. It has to be done encounter per encounter. Calculate the XP award for the encounter, and that determines how many parts you get. So that was actually a really enlightening and interesting little workshopping thing that I did when I went on a pass through that. But it also reveals something about bounded accuracy versus adding your level that you wouldn't have expected to be a side effect, but it is, which is that creatures are worth like not that much more than than creatures that are much lower level than them, and that makes it very challenging to tie treasure or other rewards like that to the creature.
Okay. We had a very mathy section in the last interview, which actually was one of my favorite parts. You talked about adding polynomials, and
Yes, I
what
mentioned it here too.
what are the factors in that equation? Is offense is Did you actually have a list of things you
I mean, I
a
didn't
string
draw
of
up
factors,
I didn't
variables?
create an exact polynomial equation,
Oh,
but
okay.
I recognize the fact that there were both polynomial and exponential aspects to what was going on there that needed to sort of add up to be roughly doubling in power every 2 levels.
Okay. And
And
it kind of it was like there was an offensive quotient or offensive um, part of it and a defensive part of it.
yeah, it's a combination of offense and defense because
Okay.
even if you think of it as purely offense, like the threat is how much threatening stuff did they do to you? The
Mm.
defense is related to that because if they can't live past the second round, then they won't do as many threatening things over the course of a 4 round fight as if they survived all 4 rounds. They'll do twice as much stuff to you. Obviously, it's much more dangerous if it's totally not fair to say, oh, well, if it's only going to survive 2 rounds, we'll double its threat because then they can pack that all in
Uh-huh.
to the first 2 rounds. It's way more dangerous than doing it over the course of 4 rounds. There is some degree to which not being able to survive means that you can't pump out your offense across as long of a period.
Okay. Okay. All right. I want to I was thinking of the fact that when by having adding your level
Mm-hmm.
combined with 4 degrees of success,
Yep.
it makes it less unpredictable. It makes it more predictable what the outcome of the party fighting a moderate encounter will be, because your a moderate encounter by definition is half as strong as the party, and they're going to have lower armor classes, lower DCs, lower attack bonuses, and therefore a much lower chance to even land whatever effect they're trying to land. Whereas I usually find in other systems, trying to calculate DPR as an average doesn't really show you the whole picture, because what if they get a string of low rolls? They can have zero effect on what's going to happen in this combat. Does that?
So I'm going to say that I don't think that inherently bounded accuracy or 2 degrees of success are guaranteed to make it so that it's hard to figure out what's going on. Um, that it's a confluence of a lot of things,
Mm.
including like whether you have certain spells or abilities that are way out of control compared to other ones, or numerous out of control stacking. Is, I would say, a bigger factor for some of the other editions. Even 5e has more untyped stacking bonuses than you might think when you think of it as almost always just being
That
advantage
actually
and
was one on my
disadvantage.
list. Sorry to interrupt, but it was on my list about bounding bonuses. That was also a phrase I was thinking of saying,
Yeah,
because I mean, say what you did in Pathfinder to try to address unlimited stacking.
I mean, so in Pathfinder First Edition, anybody could come out with like a gelatin bonus as a new bonus type and then give it to you, and it would combine with every other bonus type. So in Second Edition, literally the rules say that on like there are only a certain type of bonuses, and furthermore, you cannot have an untyped bonus that combines with them. It literally is not allowed. It is allowed for penalties. It is not allowed for bonuses. So you can have, and the penalties that are untyped and combined with everything else are ones you bring upon yourself. They're not ones you can force on your enemy. So you can have a status bonus, you can have a circumstance bonus, and on top of the item bonuses for items you may already have, and like your ability modifier and proficiency, and that's it. There's
Mm.
not going to be anything else.
So,
So
uh, so you guys decided you wanted item bonuses to cap at 3, and legendary bonuses in the playtest would cap at +3. That eventually became +8 in the final version, and then
and it was 5 for item bonuses in the playtest as
ah,
well.
okay. Um,
But
yeah.
we did have a point in time where we're going to change it from 5 to 3, and we were going to keep proficiency, where it was like really kind of beautiful when, hey, expert proficiency is a +1 on top of your level, and an expert blacksmith can make a weapon that gives you a +1 to hit, and master proficiency is +2 on top of your level, and a master blacksmith can make a +2 to hit weapon, and where we kind of had the pluses be determined by the skill of the smith. That was really cool. I liked it. It didn't work out, but it was cool.
Okay. So I'm almost done with kind of my main questions on other things.
And I would say that even though I said that I thought that inherently bounded accuracy and 2 degrees of success did not necessarily guarantee that an encounter would be less stable, I totally agree with you that other editions encounters are less stable and less predictable. Partially just because of save or lose situations that are kind of one of the main ways that you can lose in some of those editions, like I mentioned with 6 Harpies or something like that, or Jason Bowman wrote a Pathfinder Society adventure where you open the door and you're inside of 4 mummies despair auras, and when I ran it, everybody except one person were immediately paralyzed, and were so for the entire encounter. Fortunately, that one person won the entire fight by himself.
Because
and that's sort of like it's very emblematic of Pathfinder First Edition. If he hadn't, they would have all died.
Yeah, and the other 3 people
because
got pizza.
The paralysis lasted for longer than the fight did.
What was that? Oh yeah. I was going to say too that the bonuses question, it not only got at controlling the math, but also the complexity problem. Because I remember high level 3rd edition, I would have a sheet of paper in which my players would write down all of the buffs that they would cast before every battle that they could anticipate, and there'd be like 15 effects, and some of them were competence bonuses, others were morale bonuses, and it was really that was a lot to handle. But having them limited to the number of types gives you far less to. In the level 20 video I did, I think there were only 4 pre-buff spells for effects.
It certainly makes it less onerous to run. And let me tell you, when I was doing our final encounter of Rise of the Runelords, in 1st edition, I really, really homebrewed up the encounter myself. I used way dastardly tactics that caused the fight to have sort of 3 stages, as some of the dastardly tactics of defeating proxies that the enemy was using, so you weren't actually fighting them, sort of each went off. And it was fun, but let me tell you that session that we did that was fun. You know which session wasn't as much fun? The entire 4-hour session we spent before that was entirely the pre-buffing.
Oh my god. 4 hours.
Yes.
In my final battle for Rap and Athletic, we did spend 3 hours, I think, talking about the pre-buffing. 2 and 3 hours.
So it's about the same, right?
And a lot of it, too, was because they were anticipating the enemy having Mage's Disjunction, which could dispel not only all spell effects, but all of their magic items. Which made even the math after you had figured it out in advance could completely, the floor could be, the rug could be pulled from under you in the middle of combat. One thing I haven't gotten into, I didn't have really a question, was there's not an assumed adventuring day in Pathfinder 2. In Pathfinder 1, there was some attrition of resources that was expected, which I think kind of didn't really work. And
it didn't.
It got to high levels and people had 50 spell slots. But I do appreciate too that the ability to get to full health and focus points in Pathfinder 2. That makes it easier to balance individual encounters. I don't know if I'm going to invite people in the chat to ask any other questions related to that topic, but I've had a couple of questions that are kind of related to the balancing of Pathfinder 2 that I think that I'd like to know, which is one is when you see monsters of a given level, they tend to have higher statistics than your typical player character of that same level, and I want to know why that is.
I mean, they tend to have more consistent statistics. Basically, if you look at let's say a soldier monster, That's one of the most standard kind of monsters, the soldier roadmap from monster building. It has fighter accuracy, so that's already going to be more than non-fighters, but the same as fighters. It has fighter, but not champion AC, by which I mean champions actually have more AC than the AC that's on the soldier roadmap, so they're going to be higher. But it will have about as much AC as like a fighter or most other martials do at certain levels. And it doesn't follow this exactly because monsters go up very steadily. Like they go like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. They don't try to follow where your stuff is going to go up. So at some levels they'll be behind some levels by 1, some they'll be above by 1, and so on. Then they tend to have saving throws that are generally around what you might expect high, low, and medium to be for a PC, whereas terrible is more like, haha, look at me, I have 10 constitution and trained in and fortitude and I never raised them, or something like that. They tend to have statistics that look around what PCs would have if the PCs were getting them to the max of where they could be, and they tend to consistently have those. So what this does is it, and not all monsters are like that, right? A brute roadmap would have more of a barbarian, rogue, ranger, everyone except fighter, martial accuracy, and would do extreme damage, because the amount of damage a soldier does is usually going to be less than a PC actually deals, in many cases. Like, take a look at level -1 to get a really good example of this, because -1 is actually a level that intentionally the soldier roadmap or some of those other ones are trying to build the creature's accuracy above what PCs would be for a reason. And you know what that reason is? Well, we don't have glancing blows anymore like we did in that early concept doc. So those level -1 creatures have to do something, or they're just sitting there completely not doing anything. And even at level 1, you want them to hit, and at level 2 you might still use them as mooks, and you want them to have a chance to hit. So what they have is a kind of a really high accuracy, but their damage of 2.5 is not. That is not a lot of damage, right? There's no level 1 PC. Even the wizard 2-handing the staff does more than 2.5. So they were intentionally sort of designed with lower damage than anyone would possibly have, but good accuracy. At level -1.
Outside of those lowest levels, is it just a false perception that monsters tend to have higher statistics?
I'd say no. I would say that it's not necessarily a false perception, but it is a
because I was wondering if it was compensated by the player's abilities. Because
so their statistics are more consistent. They tend to have statistics that are more consistent. They don't consistently have a flaw, whereas your PC might, if you ignored Constitution, you might be really low on Fortitude. And monsters are less likely to have a terrible Fortitude than you are to just say that you didn't raise your Constitution, right? Similarly, monsters have fewer abilities that tend to do more by a little, and PCs have way more abilities and way more buffs. So monsters, they want to have consistent statistics because they're never going to have as many buffs to throw on themselves as you do. And so if they not only didn't have the buffs but also had inconsistent statistics that were flagging down as low as other statistics would be, then we're talking about high level play, right? That would especially mess up high level play. When because buffs are equally powerful at all levels. Like a +2 to hit is just as good at level 20 as it is level 1, but people don't see it that way, and so they feel like some of the buffs have to scale up and be bigger numbers at higher levels, and therefore it can get more out of control what the difference is between a buffed party and a party that isn't buffed. Now, if you'd rather see monsters that don't have consistent stats, that are consistently towards the higher end of what a player could have, although not AC, monsters almost very rarely have AC that's as good as a champion, or at high levels when your dex hits the cap a monk, can have, because basically legendary AC is more akin to extreme. But if you want to see monsters that just don't have as good stats as the PCs, you could always lower their stats all around. Maybe get rid of bonuses, status and circumstance bonuses from the game on the PC side, in order to sort of make it a little where it's like now the monsters are always behind, but you can't also get even more ahead of them. And
Probably
if you
easier
do
to
that,
just-
if you do that, it does make it so that there's way fewer tactical, fun, buffing support things that you can do with the numbers. And so some playstyles don't exist. But if your group just like, we hate buffing, we don't want to buff, we don't want to change the numbers, we just want to damage, and that's it, then consider the variant where you get rid of the buffs for the PC side. Some monsters may still need to keep them, so you keep them bespoke and just lower the monsters' numbers by a certain small amount across the entire board. So you could do that.
And my last kind of question I'm interested in the answer to, is looking at the monster creation charts and what it recommends for spellcasting DCs of monsters, the number that you have to save against. Their spell attack bonus is higher. If you were to add 10 to the spell attack bonus, it is usually 2 higher than what the difficulty class is. And do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, for monsters with monsters with lower spell DCs, their spell attack modifier is usually only 8 below. If they have an extreme like the Lich, it usually is the full 10 below. Unless someone messed up, because some people didn't get the memo on that, and so I'm sure there's some that are extreme that accidentally are also only 8 lower. But they should be 10 lower almost any time that they're extreme. And there's a reason for that. It's kind of interesting, because you might think, why is it 8 lower? Like, what's different about monsters that they do it like that a lot of the time, whereas PCs, they don't do it like that a lot of the time. And what's different is that monsters, in a lot of cases, especially something like a magical striker with a moderate save DC, have something better to do. And does that mean that it would be even better to just not give them a spell attack at all? Yes, probably. But sometimes you can't get away from it because, like, their story says they have to have disintegrate or produce flame or something like that from previous editions. So when the problem is that if you have a monster that just has, like, let's say like an I-beam strike that does a lot of range damage with very high accuracy, then their own spell attack roll spells are competing against that. And you don't want to have given them an ability that's a trap for them. Whereas with a player character, you don't have to worry about that. Like, if your fighter is a master of archery and has ridiculous arrow routines, you're probably not going to take Produce Flame as a cantrip. And even if you did, there's not like a risk that you haven't played your fighter for, you've played your fighter in like 50 battles, and you know that you're not going to use Produce Flame unless you have to against a troll or something that you need to use fire. Whereas with the GM, there's definitely a risk that the GM just looks through and is like, oh, I've got this Produce Flame or this other thing that had like, and if you paid a lot of attention, you see, oh wow, its accuracy is 7 lower than my strike. But the GM this may be the first time they've ever encountered that creature, so you don't want to have created a situation where their ability is a trap compared to their other ability. And PCs don't have that because they voluntarily chose to take their features in many cases, and they have a lot of experience playing themselves. They're much less likely to fall into that trap. And again, is it even less of a trap if you just don't give them a spell attack roll ability to begin with if they have a good ranged attack? Yes. But sometimes you can't avoid it.
Yeah, because when I saw that, I was wondering if it was because of the fact that spells that have a DC usually have some partial effect on a successful save by the target. And so, because, what if you have a spell attack roll and you don't hit the target number, you usually whiff. There's usually 0 effect. And
yeah, it is not because of that.
Oh, okay. Because I was then going to say, if that was the answer,
it's not related to it in any way. It's completely and utterly unrelated to the degrees of success, because that's not even always true. Some spell attack rolls do have a success or do something on a failure. Not a lot of them. Some of them do.
Okay.
But the reason is related to what those spell attack roll abilities are, which is often damaging effects that the monster already has. Whereas the DC effects could be some kind of nasty incapacitation spell that is gonna just take one of your PCs out of the fight.
Mhm.
And so that's comparing apples to oranges, and it's like, yeah, sure, maybe the DC isn't that high on that, but that's fine because that's something else. Whereas if the attack bonus is low on produce flame on a monster that has a fire eye beam that's just better, then it's comparing apples to apples, and one of the apples is rotten.
Yeah,
If you see what I'm saying. So that's
yeah, and I found too,
sort of where it comes from. Also, in some senses, it goes back to buffs. PCs pretty likely to be able to throw up some buffs on someone who's doing an important spell attack roll, and monsters also they can't, like, almost ever. They're very rarely gonna have it. Nobody's gonna be like, well, my gunslinger did a fake out and gave you a +4 on your next attack roll, which I knew was gonna be a disintegrate that you true struck, and then also had heroism, so you're now at +7 to hit and rolling twice, and things like that happened in my PF2 campaign that I ran. The disintegrating spellcaster got some really nasty disintegrates off.
I kind of think I see an issue where there's a particular NPC in the adventure paths who is like 2 levels or 3 levels above the party when encountered, who casts Eclipse Burst. And when you encounter a spellcaster in Pathfinder 2e who's higher level than you and casting a big area attack with a DC and 3 people critically fail, it is very, very impactful.
That's why you don't want to boost the DC.
Yeah, so I think that's actually I think I see that now. Because
it's a little tricky, and you have to think about that, and you have to be very careful about what you're doing. And you could also just sort of go in and be like, well, this monster doesn't have a higher accuracy, but their produce flame has a special ability that causes it to do more damage. But that's like a lot harder to learn than just the number being a different amount. So there's ways to go. There's ways to alter it to make it so it's not a trap option for that monster. But that's just sort of... It's an interesting and weird dynamic that monsters have and PCs don't, because monsters are built as this patchwork chimera of whatever the designer of the monster can imagine, whereas a PC is built organically out of pieces that were selected by that character for a purpose that fit together in that character's build. And the monster might just be like... Literally, I think one of the devils only has produced flame because there were like 3 APs where it was important that one of those kind of devils was going around a city burning down buildings with produced flame. And so it was like, well, we it's not that useful in combat, but we want it to be not a complete trap. But if they lost it, those stories wouldn't make sense that they summoned those devils. So we have to keep the produced flame.
Okay, I want to ask one last question before we wrap up, which is there something that you think game design could do more in the future to help high-level, high fantasy play?
I mean, I think that Pathfinder 2nd Edition has shown a light on the fact that you can have a mechanics-heavy kind of, like rulesy. All D&D likes, even 5e, which people talk about being lighter, are pretty mechanics-heavy compared to narrative games and what's out there in most other places. But you can have one that goes up to the highest levels and does not kind of become either degenerate or requiring of hours and hours on the GM to do very specific things to make it work. You can have it where it just kind of works and a new GM can run it at those levels. It's possible. We proved that it's possible because before there were very few situations where people really felt that they could do it. And so I think we're going to see more systems that try to analyze the success of PF2 and use it to reproduce that success and create gameplay that is stable over the course of all of the levels. And we're going to still continue to see systems that kind of don't care about the high levels being stable and that sort of sacrifice the balance across the gameplay for various other design reasons. And some of which are a design failure, but some of which are just having a design goal that was contradictory to it and where they didn't care enough. A good example of this is if you've ever seen someone, and I've seen this before, trust me, as a designer, where someone proposes something that's like a level 19 or 20 ability and it's completely busted. It obviously ruins the game more or less. And then you say, that kind of ruins the game, right? And they're like, yeah, but it's level 19, or yeah, it's level 20 though, so who cares? You need to just never allow someone to do that. You need to establish that those highest levels do have their own balance system. Even if it's a very wahoo amount of power that is allowed there, that it still has a limit, and it can't just be, oh, anything goes at that level. You need to reject the idea of, like, yeah, it's fine though, because it's level 20, no one will ever get there. And it's because and to be fair, to be frank, people who think about the fact that you mostly only play lower levels, even if you want to play higher levels and the system works, because lots of people like to start at the beginning, and your game might die along the way. That's true. The number of games that are actually at level 20 is not very high, even in a system like PF2 where it works. So maybe it could be, it's not saying that you're a bad designer if you chose to sacrifice high-level play being unbalanced for something that helps in low-level play. That may be more realistic and less idealistic than making a game that works across all levels, to be frank. Like, there are discussions to be had. I'm not trying to say that one is superior to the other. I'm just proud of our achievement.
Okay, and I speak for myself and I think many viewers that we're very happy with what Pathfinder achieved. I feel like one way to restate it is that I think magic still feels magical, but not breaking. And that's a real challenge, because you do want magic to be wonderful and kind of tell stories. And that's also kind of siphoned off into rituals. Rituals are their own. You cannot cast a ritual in the middle of battle, but rituals are still there to do things that can kind of, are the centers of big stories. Like the big ritual and we didn't that will do something big in a story. You just
and we didn't make all of the utility non-damaging stuff into rituals like 4E did, which I think is a little bit of a different take as well. Like, they're there for the ones that are so long, you might as well not have to spend a spell slot on them, and anybody can do them, which has some of the pros of the 4E rituals, or especially the occult rituals from Pathfinder First is the most similar rituals to it. And it doesn't have some people felt there were the cons of, like, oh, all the utilities and rituals now, so the only thing spellcasters were doing was damage.
I think there is a preponderance of people wanting low-level play, as you said, but I do have one of my groups in my professional GMing, they wanted the high-level play. There are people who are, and we all know those kinds of gamers are out there.
I like high-level play. You'll see a lot of horror stories of someone who's like, I'm picking up this system new, and we started at level 17, and I'm having trouble. And it's like, you poor person, but also, good luck.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Mark. Once again, tell us about your upcoming Kickstarter, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right, so at kickstarter.rollforcombat.com on the 26th, that's this Tuesday, we've got all sorts of things that are going to be available. We've got the Year of Monsters with 12 new ancestries, Demon, Gremlin, Intelligent Weapon, Dungeons Expanded, Oni, Nymph, Doppelganger, Minotaur, Slime, Theno, Mimic, and she has been revealed as the 12th, thanks to over 100 likes on this stream. And you will also be able to get Eldamon, which are these cool elemental monsters that shift between like a small cute form you can follow around and a battle form that fights, which has both a book and a card game and plushies and dice and miniatures. And there's also Battle Zoo Bestiary Strange and Unusual, the winners of RPG Superstar 2021, 150 plus award-winning monsters, more monster parts crafting, the aberrant soul archetype for when you want to be changing into an aberration over time. And all of that is going to be available on the 26th. I'm super excited about it. And there's going to be an AMA on Reddit about it. And someone in chat was asking...
Is it true that there's a secret 13th ancestry? Was Steven?
Oh yeah, there is. I mean, there is, but it's in the stretch goals.
Oh, okay.
So there is a 13th ancestry. It's in the stretch goals, and I decided that if this stream unlocked the 12th ancestry, that I would be willing to say what the 13th one is in the other one. So in fact, you all are so much winners that you helped everyone, because I was just gonna not say what the 13th one was otherwise, but. Now, when I'm on, in about 2 hours, I'm going to be on on Twitch on Infinite.
Ooh,
And I'm going to reveal the 13th Ancestry at that point in time.
Infinite,
Which will not necessarily... Yeah, Infinite is like a mostly Pathfinder Infinite review thing, but we're not on Infinite, but it sometimes does other third-party. From Dustin Knight, who's a freelancer who's written stuff for Paizo before, and has also written third-party content. So I'm going to be on there, and I will reveal what the 13th is. Again, it's not guaranteed. It's a stretch goal. It might not make it in.
Okay.
But I will,
it will help
tell you what
incentivize that people reaching that stretch goal, as we saw the power of incentives today.
Yes, incentives do have some power. We have so many good stretch goals, and on that next interview, I will reveal the stretch goal ancestry, thanks to everyone here successfully making our goal and revealing the she. That's SIDHE. It's the Fey nobilities with Leonanshi and Bivanshi existing already in Pathfinder 1st and 2nd edition. Now, of course, it's sometimes spelled SITH, but we're not going to release an ancestry that looks like it's Sith from Star Wars. Yeah. So we're going to use the other spelling that doesn't look like it's Sith from Star Wars.
Yeah. So someone asked for the link. I'm going to post it when we're done. You can send it to me on Discord, and I'll share it with people.
It's kickstarter.rollforcombat.com.
No, I did post that already.
For the Infinite thing, I don't think that Twitch gives a pre-link. So you just kind of have to go to the...
I need to know where to find the channel. Infinite.
Yeah.
We're finding it for you, audience, right now.
Let me figure out where it is, too. I actually don't know. For those who
we had a whole half-hour discussion on the Kickstarter, if you're late in arriving. We had a huge audience today. We went up to the 80s. It's great to see.
I'm sure I can find it somewhere. I know that that Dustin advertises when he goes live often in our...
Infinite. Is it spelled like infinite?
So it's called Infinite, but here we go. Actually, it looks like there is a link after all. It is... Oh, it's just twitch.tv/Kitsune Warlock, which is his forum handle. So it's just his
Kitsune Warlock.
Twitch.tv/Kitsune Warlock, all one word. And that's obviously just the name of his stream, and then you'll have to find the one that goes live. Okay. I mean, it'll just be on there.
Okay.
So that's what it is. Twitch.tv/Kitsune Warlock. Obviously, if you're watching this at any time other than now live, you're not gonna find that link is gonna lead to anything related to what we're talking about, because Twitch will just show whatever the most current thing is. But if you are currently watching, then in 2 hours, twitch.tv/Kitsune Warlock will have my second interview for the day, and we will reveal the 13th hidden ancestry that nobody knew about until today. That is a stretch goal. And I will say that a bunch of people guessed this one, whereas nobody guessed she. Nobody, not even with clues. A bunch of people guessed the 13th ancestry, so you will be happy if you guessed the 13th ancestry, because it's going to be a possibility.
Just FYI, Swing Ripper, he likes board games, and he wants to know if stretch questions can lead to hearing more about the card game. I guess that's just a little dropping. I'm just dropping that for you, that there is some interest in that, hearing a little more.
Oh, yeah. The card game is really cool. Like I mentioned, I have a really, really, really preliminary version, but I did play it with Linda, and we discovered that considering how preliminary it was pretty balanced, because we like switched Eldamon, and since I created it and knew all of the things that I had come up with, I won it with both switches. So it was not like one of them was not so overpowered that it won no matter what, but it was ridiculously close both times. Like fire that I had made just did so much damage that it would just chew through the other person. Mine did almost no damage, but it was very tricky. So I was doing things like canceling moves and like mind controlling to use something from her discard against her. And that was how I was barely able to pull it off with mind.
Oh, intriguing.
Yep. So we'll see what the final version is like. It may not even be like that much, but I like where it's going now. Basically, you play your two moves secretly without revealing to each other, then flip at the same time. They have sort of speeds, and the one that's faster goes first on that turn. And that's important because, like, the reason I won with Mind, it had, like, a pretty mediocre, not very fast move that did mild damage and then cancels anything else that comes after it. And so I guessed that Linda would play a really slow move that does massive damage and makes her discard another card, and she did. And so I canceled that really slow move, and then on the next turn I mind controlled her to make her burn herself with that very slow move. And that did it, because if she had actually gotten off that move on me, I was toast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a game that the rules of what you need to do are actually very simple. In fact, so simple.
And he was asking about a resource system.
A resource system.
Yeah, I guess you know how
we don't really have a resource system. And I mean, the resources are the moves, sort of, but
like cards,
or just like your abilities.
You're not spending a point of something.
You're not spending anything. It's just it's like a real fight in the game. But the thing that was really cool is it's so simple to learn that you could even have a quote AI where they just randomly play their moves out of the deck and you just draw to see what it does. It's usually easy to beat, but you could. And a little kid can just play based on the picture without knowing what the card does. They can play completely legally very easily. But it has a huge amount of depth because the psychology of trying to guess what your opponent is doing will allow you to develop counter strategies. Or if you're playing the AI, you play the odds, knowing what moves they have and what they might play at random. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of how it works. So yeah, Swing Ripper, the cards that you're playing, they are the moves are themselves the resource, and crucially, it works just like the actual RPG does. I mean, not exactly the same; it's stylized, but also in the RPG, you have certain moves and you're rotating them. You're not playing them over and over with the same one. So a card play discard situation is about right. You don't have a deck. You're not like drawing randomly to see what you have. You just have all of the moves available at first, and you discard them when you've used them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, someone reports there's a raid from NoNat's stream to mine.
There's a raid for NoNat, but we were about to stop. But
I know we
can't stop if NoNat is gonna raid right now. Can we?
Is he still online? Go away, go back, because we're about to end.
What?
I was saying I don't know if he's done yet, but yeah, we already wrapped up. I think we should put up the post. We had a lot of talk about high level play and about the Kickstarter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks to NoNat. I want to thank him for that. Okay, I think we really are truly done. Okay, and I believe the chat's still up. There may be some more questions if you want to hang out some more, but I got to eat some lunch and feed my cat.
All right, well, go ahead and feed your cat, and I will get ready for my next interview. So if you want to see the 13th thing, then go watch it on twitch.tv/KitsuneWarlock. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye. Okay, Mark, thanks so much.